Not every wound comes from childhood abuse. Some comes from abandonment, some comes from emotional absence, and some comes from having to grow up too fast. And others come from never having to grow up at all. The truth is, your childhood may still be shaping the way you live your life today. So today we're going to dive just a little bit deeper. Welcome back to Undivided. I'm your host, Adam Maxwell, and we will be discussing how you can rebuild your life through faith, discipline, and adventure. Today, we're going to be getting back into The Child You Left Behind. I did not know I was going to do a part two, but I realized there's some stuff that I missed, so we're going to jump back in. So, part one, we talked about your childhood patterns and how they became adult behaviors, how over enabling your child can harm you and that child in their adulthood, and the effects of fatherlessness. So, today I want to go a little deeper with you guys um, because I don't know if I was even really prepared last episode to talk about this stuff because this one kind of hits hard for me. So, some of the stuff we're going to go over today are motherlessness, severe trauma, and PTSD, and the sibling dynamics and why children from the same home can have completely different results becoming an adult. So, I'll jump right in. Motherlessness and the emotional development. Motherlessness can come in various shapes and sizes. One can be due to the passing of a mom, the death of a mom, which I don't have any, I don't know what that's like, but I know many of you out there do. And it is something that is out of your control in life. And but it can still have the ramifications of the rest of the motherlessness issues. The next one is emotional absence. Emotional absence is where the mother kind of shuts down a little bit. Oftentimes that relates to fatherlessness, and uh, they they just don't have the emotions there because they're kind of beat down, which turns into lack of nurturing, inconsistent affection, because they just, like I say, they things are tough, right? And sometimes their childhood causes them to have some of these adult behaviors that we've spoke to about before. You know, if you're a younger person, don't forget your parent was you once too, and they might have gone through the same stuff or worse, depending on their childhood. But their generation, generally speaking, kind of keeps that stuff bottled up, unfortunately. And also, the last is the overworked and the emotionally unavailable mothers. So again, that kind of ties with the fatherlessness, and trying to keep the father in the home is an extremely important thing. Also, the mother, right? But if you're there together, you can take on the world as a team rather than having to try to do it alone. Motherlessness trauma is also known as the mother wound because it affects people quite a lot. They both have their effects, as we've spoke about fatherlessness before in the last episode, episode 4. If you want to jump back and get into that, if you didn't hear it, I go over it pretty in depth. Often this results in chronic feelings of worthlessness, abandonment fears, and trust issues that persist into adulthood, frequently leading to a relational trauma complex, PTSD, and difficulties in self-regulation. So fatherlessness versus motherlessness. Again, try to say that 3 times fast. It's a lot of S's, I know. Um, so fatherlessness versus motherlessness. People can argue back and forth. One is more important than the other, or however you want to cut it. But neither is better or worse than the other. They each come with their own, own set of tools, or own um, behavioral issues that come out of it for a child. Fatherlessness is oftentimes more antisocial behavior, um, aggression, school dropouts, poverty in the future, 4 times more likely to live in poverty in your future. And that oftentimes, or a lot of times, leads to jail time, prison time, um, and just kind of overall outward failure. And motherlessness is deeper. it kind of it struggles with the attachment and intimacy of a person, of a man especially. Again, I'm on this, I'm leaning into the male side of these things, as that's kind of where we're at with this. But there are drastic effects of fatherlessness with women, young girls, and also motherlessness. There's many things that it affects there as well. But motherlessness, because of that attachment and intimacy issues, oftentimes you get yourself into toxic relationships. You feel as though you're unlovable, that you just aren't worth it. You don't get that nurturing and that love that you need to be a successful partner. Vigilance to rejection, so you are always on the lookout for a reason your significant other is going to be leaving you, even if they're just mildly upset with you. Um, Sometimes you see that as a warning sign that they're out of here, and I've done that without a question. And, sometimes that explodes or implodes the relationship to where I am like, they're going to break up with me, not I'm going to get them first. If you haven't dealt with that before, um, good. And then also addiction and self-soothing. You A lot of addiction and self-soothing comes from the motherless relationship, because you're just trying to find something to make you feel whole again inside. There's another way to do that too, and we'll discuss that a little bit later on. And there's obvious crossovers between motherlessness and fatherlessness. It's not, one is for sure this and the other is for sure that. But in most cases, like I say, the fatherlessness is kind of an outward antisocial behavioral thing, and the motherlessness is kind of deeper internal, um, emotional deal, because moms bring nurturing and emotions to the world of a child. So, some of the key aspects of motherlessness trauma, like I mentioned, it's called the mother wound. Emotional neglect or absence of nurturing, even if a mother's physically present, can cause. Even if she's physically present, she can be emotionally abandoning you, and you just can't connect with them. And again, it's not always mom's fault, right? There's times where they just don't have anything left to give, but at the same time, when it comes to your children, sometimes you just have to pick up the pieces and give them everything you got, even if it feels like there's nothing left. And this can cause deep-seated traumatic wounds in young men. Like I say, insecure attachments. You just don't trust anybody that you become attached to. Um, you become avoidant. You avoid even trying to get into a relationship. Anxious. You have anxiety. You just can't quite grasp your feelings, um, and you have disorganized attachment patterns. You fall for the wrong people. You get yourself into the wrong um, friend groups. You get yourself into the wrong relationships with your partners. And another thing that occurs from this when you're young is indiscriminate friendliness. Um, I think and the UCLA Health mentioned that there are issues with the amygdala development when the mother is not present, and that can cause trust levels with strangers that are kind of off, right? Like too much trust with a stranger, too much affection towards people that they don't know, and that can be because the mother is not around. Again, some of these things happen, some of them don't. Sometimes stronger and weaker in different cases. And then there's hyper independence when you don't have your mom around. Um, and that's because of the fear of your needs not being met at any time. So you feel as though you have to become independent on your own. Um, Extreme self resilience and the inability to be vulnerable. You kind of shut off. You don't let people see your emotions. You don't, and sometimes you're you're over emotional. But the inability to be vulnerable, it's really tied a lot to a lot of guys. There's the idea that you got to be tough all the time, um, but sometimes you just have to let that go and allow yourself to be you. You can still be tough. It's one of the hardest things in the world to do, is to actually face your childhood that created the man you are right now. So some of the long-term effects with adults when it comes to motherless home, are relationship challenges, difficulty with intimacy, mentioned before, fears of abandonment, and the tendency to attract toxic partners, um, because that's a lack of secure attachment. Because if the mom's not present, that's the person that teaches you the nurture side of things and allows you to really become attached to somebody or feel positive attachment, and knowing what that looks like. Most of the stuff is learned behaviors. If you want to be successful in a relationship, you have to have successful relationships around you. Mental health struggles, high susceptibility to chronic loneliness, severe anxiety, depression, and low self worth. There was a time where I didn't think I was worth anything. Um, when I met my wife, I didn't think that we were going to have a long term relationship in any way. I was just kind of going on to the next. But I got to know her, and I got to meet her family. A successful family. I'm not saying that they're perfect either. Nobody is. No relationship is perfect. But I got to see what it looked like to have a mom and a dad that are married and that are raising two good people. And they allowed me to see that with my own eyes. And we we oftentimes try to mimic other people, even in a conversation. There's times where you'll be in a conversation and somebody will have an accent, or um, they'll just kind of be a certain way. And before you know it, you're like, why am I talking with a Southern drawl? Um, why am I acting that way? We mimic each other. So when you see something successful going on, or you never see it, oftentimes you're going to resemble those relationships or those actions and those behaviors. And um, it's hard to get past that if you don't work on yourself, and you don't get yourself in a place where you can let go of the poor uh, home the home struggle that you had when you were growing up. um, there's obviously mental health struggles. Like I mentioned, we already talked about that. And then parenting struggles. Adults who are motherless may struggle to provide nurturing to their own children, where you just kind of make them deal with it themselves. Oh, I made it. I figured it out. But did you? Did you figure it out? Or are you just saying you figured it out because you're still alive as an adult, which is beautiful. I'm happy you're here. I'm happy you're with us. I'm glad that you've come this far, but there's still things that you can do to advance your lifestyle and make your life better and happier every single day, or more purposeful. I think that if you find purpose in life, happiness follows. To just aim for happiness, I think, is kind of unrealistic, because there's more to happiness than just getting a new car. Um, so, with that said, there's healing and recovery that comes along with that. That's validating the loss, recognizing the mother wound, recognizing that you did grow up in this fashion where your mom wasn't quite available for you, where she was trying to figure out herself or survive. Oftentimes there's relationships where the father works, the mother doesn't, and then the divorce occurs. Well, it's difficult for anybody to all of a sudden have to start working because they didn't have a career or whatever. They were a mother, right? Their career was being a nurturing mother, which I think is one of the best jobs that's out there. And it's really been spit on. I think it has a lot to do with, the failures in relationships, and the distancing themselves with their relationship from God. Um, because you have to be able to forgive, you have to be able to understand that people aren't perfect, and that you're going to have ups and downs in your relationships. So you got to validate the loss, and see it for what it is, and then make sure that you see what it is, and that you can take the first step towards bettering your existence. There's obviously therapeutic support, seeking therapy to address these attachment issues and process early loss. If you lost your mother early on as a child, that's really tough, especially if they're gone for good, um, and often involving inner child work. Some of this stuff, kind of sounds a little soft, but at the end of the day, if you can get past that, it'll make you a stronger and harder individual when it comes time. You can be the awesome dad that's more a superhero than he is a schlub. So, and then self parenting. That's another self parenting. You develop self compassion and learning to meet one's own emotional needs, and actually seeing what you need in life, identifying it instead of just gulping down a bunch of booze and smoking a ton of weed or any other addiction or habit that is trying to force these emotions away. And then you can start to recognize what the problem truly is. Um, so motherlessness is a tough one. I struggled with it. I was the youngest, and my younger brother came along 10 years after me with my mom's second marriage. But when my parents divorced, my mom was thrust into the role of being caregiver. Um, Not only caregiver, but she was, supporting the children emotionally, financially, physically, making sure we had everything that we needed in order to stay alive and stay housed. And I know that, you know, my dad, he provided financially, but he wasn't quite there because when in my life, my son, my older boy, our relationship fell apart with his mother and I had to move out, and it was hard. It just tore me to pieces. I had to kind of pick myself back up, and it took a little bit of time. And that's when his mother moved away because it took me longer than she wanted to wait for me to come around. And my dad struggled even more so with that because of his addictive patterns. Like I said, he and we've really developed a heck of a relationship at this point in our life. But there was a time where we just didn't spend any time together. So my mom had to try to take care of us, manage us, get us to school, all these things. And eventually the candle burnt at both ends and it kind of went out. Um, and as a child, I didn't understand that. I thought she just, I didn't think that she really cared for us at one point or another. It wasn't immediately, it took time, but we just became more of a hassle than we were a gift in her life, I feel like. And again, not her fault. She just didn't have much left to give. So emotionally, she wasn't quite there for us. And it took a toll on me because I was the youngest in the group. Blurb that out, but my younger brother, he really wrote it out the whole time. So I'll get into that and the sibling, um, basically the siblings and how they see the life differently within the same home. Uh, so going on from trying to figure out how to make yourself a better father, even though you may have had a motherless home in one way or the other. I want to get into something that I didn't touch on, and that was severe trauma, abuse, and PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. And that can come in all shapes and forms and sizes. Uh, Everything from whether you're a veteran and you had to deal with um, you're a veteran and you had to deal with combat, or a veteran and you had to deal with training for combat and some of the grisling things that it takes to become a soldier, to being a first responder and having to deal with people bleeding out in front of you and dying and having to save their lives, being a nurse and having to help save people's lives, and seeing things that not that they're not natural, but at such a high rate that it just can mess with you. I know that there's a lot of nurses out there that deal with PTSD, but they just don't want to deal with it because it's not an easy one. Generally speaking, it takes a substantial amount of therapy and things like that. But severe trauma and abuse, um, some people out there aren't overreacting. They've just been in survival mode for so long that their nervous system has never learned what peace feels like. Uh, and it might, come all the way from childhood all the way through, because you can't fix it on your own very often when it comes to the severe trauma and abuse. Uh, Most people develop some form of an addiction when it comes to it. The abuse comes in many varieties. There's physical violence, people harming you physically, sexual abuse, as we know what that is. And then there's psychological abuse that can really be detrimental to people too, because some parents and some guardians that are taking care of you have their own problems and they take it out on you and they can mess you up real bad. Um, and when it comes to that, the severe abuse and the PTSD, you are exposed to violence in the home, addiction in the home, chaos where there's just no stability whatsoever. Every day you don't know what you're going to get when you walk through that door, the unpredictability of it, and then it puts you into an emotional survival mode, and that usually is where the PTSD comes into place. And PTSD explains simply because, again, I'm not a therapist. I will not try to pretend to be. I'm here to help motivate and point people in the right direction because I think that you're valuable, you're wonderful, you're lovely, and you deserve to get back to a normal lifestyle. But PTSD, explained simply, is hypervigilance, always being on guard, always scanning, always, looking for a threat. Emotional numbness, where you just don't really have any feelings, and you can't really give anybody any part of yourself. Explosive reactions, and with these, explosive reactions, there's avoidance where you don't want to be around anybody at any time, loud noises, anything that can trigger you, and the inability to ever relax or calm down. You always feel like there's either somebody watching or you have to watch yourself at all times because sometimes you kind of recognize what's going on with it. But um, these symptoms aren't solely you got one or the other. It could be a combination of all of them or all of them in general. So I believe that finding real help is extremely important. If you've ever experienced trauma that you can't cope with, or you struggle with suicidal thoughts or harm, please seek professional help right away. Talk to your doctor or seek a professional therapist as soon as you can. Don't be afraid or ashamed to ask for help. Life is worth living, and you truly have value. There is a way back to normal, and but you're the one that has to seek that. There's a couple places that I really find valuable. BetterHelp.com is one to try to help you find a therapist. Um, Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, and sometimes we don't have that kind of time. But if you feel as though that you can manage until you find the right person, um, betterhelp.com is a great way to find somebody near you that can help you. And sometimes, get into somebody that can help you. And then if you need to shop around for a therapist that works for you, not every person is meant for each other. Some people will see me on this podcast and be like, I don't know about this guy. He's not for me. And I understand that because not every podcast is for me either. So betterhelp.com is a great place to go. But if you need somebody today, and you feel like you might harm yourself today, do not hesitate and call 988, or you can visit uh, them online at 988lifeline.org. It's 988lifeline.org, or dial 988 on your phone, or you can text it as well, and that will get you directly to somebody to help you with your feelings and any self-harm feelings that you're having, because life is worth living and you have value. We all love you and we want to see you be able to come back to a little more normal of a lifestyle. It is possible, I assure you. Um, and I just need to get that out there because I didn't talk about it before, and it's very, very important. Um, I think that when it comes to this type of stuff, sometimes it just is too much, or feels like it's just too much. It isn't, but it feels like it is. The world is, you know, kind of closing in on you, and you just need help. And it is one of the most brave things that you can possibly do. So don't forget that. Um, it's hard to really segue from kind of some of that deep stuff, but I have to try. Um, I just had to get out there and talk about the severe abuse, the PTSD, because it was extremely important to me. That it's something in part one that I did miss. That's why I had to do a part two. That was the main one. And plus, the fatherless, motherless thing is a big deal as well. But another thing that I came to my attention, or I just kind of had thoughts on with my walks in the morning, my meditation, my time to myself to be able to speak in my own head was. Um, your siblings and how they handled everything when it comes to, coming from a chaotic upbringing, a broken family, a broken home. Something that I thought about was an idea was sibling spatial timeline. I came up with, and that's how families change over time, and siblings experience different versions of the same household. It's when each sibling has a different experience within the family dynamic due to the age at which the family breakdown occurs within the family timeline. At at what age and for how long was the child or sibling exposed to or involved in the family collapse or the family breakup? Whether they were a part of it for 1 year or 18 plus years, that can have a very drastic effect on each sibling's memories throughout that relationship, and it can change who they have become um, because of it. Because your childhood patterns turn into your adult behavior, and so oftentimes, and not always, but oftentimes, the oldest child, I got it, the oldest child saw marriage before the breakdown. Like, I'm not saying they didn't see the other side of it, but they saw the marriage before the breakdown, potentially when things were still okay or good or better. And that oldest child, generally speaking, is able to escape from the family breakdown um, the soonest because they're the oldest. So if you're in a terrible situation, that oldest child might be able to get out of there earliest. So they've seen some of the better parts of it. They've seen it that way, and then they were able to get out of there before it really set in on them. And oftentimes, the middle child feels ignored, and they adapt socially, um, and they're able to find a little bit of respite uh, with friends and friends' families outside of the home because they're a little bit older, but they're not able to get out of there yet, and they can come and go sort of as they please. When it comes to the family breakdown, they can be like, "Well, I'm out of here. I'm going to go over to my friend's house and not deal with this junk." And then you get into the youngest, and obviously this is a household of three. It varies drastically with how many kids, but this is the gist of it. So the youngest, may have been shielded from some of it from the mom or the parent or the dad, but or they experience or they remember the aftermath only, and they're unable to get away from most of this dysfunction when they're young because they're not able to come and go as they please, and they have to sit in they got to sit in the junk longer at a younger age and a more impressionable age, and spend more time in the dysfunction. So the one sibling saw, that might see the addiction firsthand. The other one might have been, too young to understand it, and one child might have experienced the poverty that occurred maybe earlier in the relationship, and then another one might have experienced the recovery of the family, or the recovery of the emotions or the addictions within the home. So one may be there and gone, and think, oh, it wasn't that bad, and they weren't on board for the whole thing, and then it works its way all the way down to the youngest, who may have spent the most time in the dysfunction. So adult patterns created by childhood roles, that kind of ties in with the siblings spatial timeline as well, because most of the time the oldest child is turns into like the responsible adult. Um, they overwork. Um, this is like their childhood pattern, right? So the responsible child becomes an adult, and they overwork all the time. They struggle to rest, and they try to carry everybody all at one time. They don't find time for themselves because they had to become an adult too soon, right? They had to become an adult before they wanted to. They had to get out of the house sooner. The ignored child not always the middle, but the middle children, they may be ignored just a little bit because the eldest was their first child, and then the last child's the baby, and then anybody in between might be that ignored child. They oftentimes are seeking validation or validation seeking adults, and they're attention craving, and there's many other things that come along with that. An addiction is one of them, and then getting themselves into toxic relationships as well. Um, and then the chaotic home survivor, not always the youngest, but the younger kids or the younger siblings within, the ones that couldn't get away and had to be in the chaos, enveloped in the chaos, they oftentimes display a lot of anxiety, hyper independence, and emotional shutdown. I fall within that category. A long time, I always was concerned. I always had anxiety. I didn't know if I was doing right by myself or anybody else. And I kind of jumped out there and just kind of handled my garbage myself. I didn't ever want any help from anybody. Even to this day, it's hard for me to ask for help. Um, and I used to emotionally shut down or aggressively react to any situation where I felt I was being judged or seen as, not doing the right thing. So your role in the family often becomes your identity in adulthood. So your role in the family often becomes your identity in adulthood. Um, and it's hard to make a change without trying to reflect and look inward into yourself, right? And last episode, I kind of did a similar thing. I do have some questions for you guys if if you want to take the time. Again, I've been doing my best to journal, and taking the time to write down my day and figure out what was wrong, what was right, so on and so forth. And I really encourage you to do some journaling yourself. Not only is it good to get some of the crap that's rolling around in your brain out to really identify if it's a good idea or not, um, it helps you with learning and intelligence, right? Some of the smartest people out there in the world journal every single day because it helps you think. It helps you critically think, and it helps you solve problems, and it helps you be able to mature and develop better emotions in general. So I've got 5 questions. I'll put them in the description along with the two the betterhelp.com, the resources, the betterhelp.com, and the 988 information will also be there if you need to access that easily. So the 5 questions that we have are: what role did you play growing up? Which one were you? Were you, were you the eldest? Were you the responsible child, the ignored child, or the chaotic home survivor out of the group? There's 800 other variables or definitions or categories of being that child. I just wanted to simplify it, and you can certainly look into it yourself. I would highly recommend it. And again, also maybe reaching out to therapy of some kind. So, what role did you play growing up? 2 is, what did younger you learn about love? That's similar to the last one. Last episode, we had a similar question. What still triggers you emotionally? What sets you off? What's the thing that you almost want to fight over, right? People calling you out for not being a good dad, or calling you out for your addictions, or calling you out because you're not there emotionally, um, and not understanding why, just automatically assuming that you're supposed to be, good at everything. It takes time to get better at this stuff. So, what still triggers you emotionally? What patterns are you still carrying to this day? Have you identified these patterns? What ones are you carrying now? And how can you get better about it, and find your way to shedding some of these patterns? And are you reacting as an adult or surviving as a child? You know, um, and it's hard sometimes to see the difference, because there's a lot of people that are affected by all of these patterns and behaviors that we've gone over, and it's a ton of information. I know it is. Um, I had a heck of a time just trying to narrow this stuff down, so that it's not too ridiculous and not too overwhelming. That's why I did a second part, because I already, the first one, it was hour 20 minutes. I never thought I could sit in front of a camera that long anyway, let alone go through that much information. But it's important. It's extremely important. And I know that if you take a little bit of time, you don't look at it as though that it's weak. You look at it as though it's a strength to become more emotionally responsible, and emotionally intelligent. I mean, it's just going to build a better family. You're going to love harder. You're going to have kids that love you more. You're going to be a hero. You don't want to be the villain. I know what the villain looks like. I've been the villain. I've gone from the villain to I don't know. I think I could ask my kids, but I think they'd kind of think maybe I wore a cape some days. I still flounder sometimes. I had a discussion with my older boy the other day, because of silly stuff as far as like leaving dishes around and stuff like that, and we're trying to get him prepared to leave the nest, and go live his life, and be prepared to have a roommate, because if you're doing the things that are happening here out there with a roommate, you're not going to like each other by the time it's all said and done. But I had a plan. I was going to talk to him and I was going to be like, okay, we're going to tell him that, you can't do this and that and the other thing. He came downstairs. I looked at him. All of a sudden, I was like, I can't believe it. And I just kind of attacked him, and I wasn't gonna. I wasn't planning on doing it. And he automatically, his defenses went up too, and he got upset. I got upset, and then we both just kind of looked at each other, and I'm like, he's like, I don't know why you're getting this way. And I'm like, I don't know why I'm getting this way. And I'm like, let's take a step back here. Let's talk about this. And it took me a second, right? Sometimes you screw up, and you gotta call yourself out, because nobody wants to be wrong. Nobody wants to be the bad guy. Nobody wants to look like a fool. And if you just look like a dang fool sometimes, and you say, you know what, I was wrong. I shouldn't have approached you that way. Let's talk about this like adults. It can change everything. And it did. We had a constructive, discussion. And next thing you know, he's taking care of some of the stuff that I had mentioned. And is that going to go on forever? Probably not. But next time I don't have to be quite so upset about it, knowing that I can just have a conversation instead. Um, but I did all of this reflecting and all of this inward search throughout my life, trying to figure out who I am and why I'm the way I am. And that only gets you so far. It only got me so far. Um, I had to get myself in a place where I surrendered myself to God. It happened several years ago in the mountains of Colorado, and I gave myself up. I surrendered myself to Him. I surrendered myself so that I didn't have to put everything, all the weight in my hands or on my shoulders every single day. It's been a journey ever since, and I've had to really work hard at getting rid of some of the bad habits, or the for lack of a better term, brainwashing, that religion isn't the thing, that saves, but it certainly is. I had to surrender myself. Faith didn't erase my past. It gave me stability, identity, and something bigger than my pain. And knowing that I didn't have to carry that pain alone for the rest of my life. I'll keep saying it. God is the ultimate anchor. He's going nowhere. He'll always be there. He's eternal. And take it or leave it, it changed my life, and I will never go back the other direction for anything. No matter what it is, no matter how it goes, I will always lean into God. And when I do, when I choose virtue over vice, it shows its face every single day. It happened to me today. Um, and it helps you with healing. It helps you with understanding that, we do make mistakes. We are sinners, and Jesus died for our sins to allow us to live an eternal life with God. It showed me responsibility. Just within the Bible, within those pages, between the covers, um, there's so many stories that are true. There are so many lessons and moral stories that are valid and that can completely, some of these texts are hundreds or thousands of years old and they still remain true today. And it helps me become a more responsible person every single day. Um, and growth. Uh, there's moments in my life where I almost let the evil in, um, the vice and the virtue. And every time I choose the virtue, my heart grows, my hope grows, my family grows stronger, I grow stronger. It's not a feeling that you can understand until you do decide to give yourself up and surrender to God. It just was today that I heard this guy talking about James, um, James 1, chapter 12, vice and virtue is what it comes down to. Um, and I had the other day a bunch of stuff come up where I heard something about my family being talked about, and I got upset. And then my younger son, got into a fight on the bus, and he came home. He was honest with me. It was a beautiful thing. That doesn't always happen, but he was honest with me about it. And I was like, oh, I was already upset. That came into play. I got even more angry. Here comes the demon, right? Like that anger, trying to push me to a point where I can't control my emotions anymore. And it felt like social media was bombarding me with the worst videos, whether it was, um, you know, women dressed all scantily clad, or if it was, videos of fights or aggression or politics. It just kept coming, and I was getting so angry. And then the kid that my kid was tussling with, his dad messaged me and wanted to talk, and I was like, oh, I just can't do it. I told him I can't do it right now. And then my wife and I came together with our son and talked to him about, what he did wrong and not to do it again. And then we decided as a family to walk down the street to this person's house and have a discussion with his father and him, and explaining to them, that this can't continue. And we had a good long talk with them, and we did the right thing. We did the virtuous thing instead of me telling his dad, nope, your son didn't do this. My kid said this, and stand up for my kid, and and bickering back and forth through text message. We did it the way we all should be doing it, and that's face to face with each other. And when it all came to a head, our kids ended up shaking hands, and they ended up playing together for an hour or so after that. And I hope and pray that that is all that it takes to show, like, we are similar, we are good, we are people that need to live within virtue. And it was an amazing thing. And as I was journaling about this, and like what giving into the temptation, or what giving into vice looks like, and overcoming vice and taking the virtuous side looks like, my internet wasn't working today. While I was trying to get all this ready to go, my music went away that I was listening to. And as soon as, I started to get frustrated, I'm like, oh, whatever. I started journaling um about vice and virtue, and how we overcame it instead of falling to the vice. And while I was sitting there doing it, all of a sudden the internet came back. A song blasted in my ears, and it was "It's a Beautiful Day" by the Kipnis and Rashawn. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but it's one of the most adorable songs you ever heard of. And it's a song thanking God. And it just came on, and I lost it, dude. I lost it, because here you sit, and the demons come in, and they try to manipulate you. They try these vice like feelings try to manipulate you to take the wrong road. And I almost did, man. And if I would have, what would have happened? I would have created an enemy. I would have shown my son how to be a monster instead of a saint. And not saying I'm a saint, but you learn what you see. I learned what I saw as a kid, and I'm making the difference, and God is right there with us. And it's the most beautiful thing. Um, and speaking of vice and virtue, um, both things are addictive, right? Generally speaking, vice is it's easy, it's simple, it's empty, it's toxic, and it's addictive. Generally speaking, saying that nasty thing on the internet instead of being like, hey, maybe you should have done it different. Oh, yeah, you're an idiot or whatever. Like, there's a lot of comments. Like, I've scrolled, I've looked at comments. Some of them are hilarious, or they seem hilarious, but those things dig, man. Um, and it's really, really kind of weak, right? Like, you're going to sit there and be a keyboard warrior. It's just weak. But vice is easy. It's simple. It's empty. It's toxic. It's addictive. And virtue, on the other hand, on the flip side of it, virtue is difficult. It's hard to take the high road. It's hard to go out there and stop in at the community center and sit down with a group of older folk and have a conversation with them and make their day or make my day. It makes my day generally. You find it funny how something difficult like that, you get into that mix and it makes your day so much better. You're out trying to make somebody else's day better, but it's difficult to do first. You have to really push yourself to do it, but it's complex. It's deep. It's meaningful. It's full. It's cleansing. It cleanses your soul. It feels so good. And once you start leaning into virtue and you continue to do these difficult, virtuous things for yourself, for others, it's madly addictive. Vice is addictive, but virtue is a whole nother level. And once you start down that path, it just makes you want it more. It makes you love harder and deeper. And it's like, I can't explain it with words. So get out there and choose virtue, my friends. Choose virtue over vice. Put down that pipe one day, choose to go for that walk and think instead of sitting there scrolling. Choose to go see the neighbor down the road that you've never talked to before and you didn't know that he lost his wife, and you find that out and then you can be there for him or her. Choose that virtue and your life will become more meaningful and you will develop purpose, and happiness follows every single time. So with that said, my friends, I just want to close today and let you know that what I'm doing here isn't for shock and awe. I don't care if whew, I don't care if I go viral. Even if I don't make money doing this thing, I'm going to keep doing it. And if I trust in God, truly, He will provide. And I've learned that. I'm not calling anybody out here. I'm not trying to cause any harm. We all make mistakes and nobody's perfect. I want to share my stories of life, and I look forward to sharing others as I'm working on interviews now, trying to get some people's perspective. And I want to show everyone how alike we really are, undivided even. Because I'm not going to stand on the sidelines anymore waiting for change, and you shouldn't either. I'm here to help. I'm here to make a difference. I'm here to make a change. Because this topic is hard. Um, because I love my family. I love my dad, my mom. Whew. My brothers and my sister. Even though we all see our existence together a little differently. Nobody wants to be wrong, including me. So I'm just trying to tell my story how I remember it. And I hope that everybody else can get out there and do the same. You know, life is hard, and doing it alone makes it even harder. So I need you to stay connected, guys. I need you to stay connected with people. I need you to find yourself. I need you to look inward. Be the change that you've been waiting for your whole life. Don't wait. Take action today, whatever that action looks like. And most importantly, you need to go out there and you need to find your faith. Hand over some control to God and let Him carry some of this burden for you. He's been waiting for you your whole life, I assure you. So if this message hits home for anybody, please share it with the ones that you love. If you're trying to rebuild your life and you don't know where to start, please message me, message me, tell me your story. Hit up my website, iamundivided.com. It has some resources there. I'm working on it. There's going to be more to come. You can contact me through there. I check every day. And I'll be here next week and every week after that. As long as you're here for me, I'm going to be here for you guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my podcast. Share it with your friends and family. Let's get the word out here. I'm tired of doing nothing, and you should be too. I'm working on some new and exciting things. I've got an apparel line that I got going. You can see it online on my website. I've got some apps that I'm working on so that we can come together as a community. I want to share it. I want it to spread like wildfire, and I need you all to help me. Okay? I love you all. I'll see you guys next week. Peace out. Steamer. You okay?
Yeah.